Studies at the University of Arizona College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. We have a very, very special speaker today and his partner Kim. They come to us from just down the road, Elgin, Sonora, Willcox. I think that you've already had some exchanges with Philip Asmundson, but I'll give you a slightly more detailed introduction to what he's all about. So the way I see Phil, he is a business person. He specialized in communication skills at a very high level at Deloitte Touche. He then found a very important niche in technology and finally in agriculture, all leading to precision agriculture that he's going to be talking to us today in a very specific, very interesting, and for Arizona pioneering area. And that is vinology, growing grapes, making wine, and putting Arizona on the map of this area of agriculture. And I want to mention also one other thing that has to do with his affinity for technology, his affinity for data, his affinity for making decisions on the basis of data, and that is his collaboration with a company in California called NioLabs, or NioLabs. NioLabs, okay. And that is the company, the technology company, that is interfacing between Philip, his plants, and what needs to be done to keep the plants in absolutely top shape condition so that they make top shape grapes and eventually wines. So here is Philip. He's got a fascinating story to tell us, and he's going to occupy the next 45, 50 minutes. And enjoy.
Great. Thank you very much for having me here, and I really look forward to sharing what we've been doing at Deep Sky. I think to start, what I'd like to do is just show you a little video that we actually put together. It's been used by us boy, this is a fast one, in presentations, and it's been used by large computer companies, one of them being Dell, to help them kick off their global sales meeting.
Farming. It's the oldest industry on Earth and arguably the most important. It feeds the world, employs millions, sustains life. And it's under siege. Agriculture consumes 70% of the world's water, its most precious resource. A single almond the size of a thumbprint requires just over a gallon to reach maturity. Put another way, that water that California uses in a single year just to grow almonds is enough to serve all the homes and businesses in the greater Los Angeles area for nearly 3 years. Farmers rely on diverse data and generations of accumulated experience to do what they do. But farming is still farming, and operating margins are slim. The oldest industry on Earth also has the oldest challenge: consume less, produce more. The data that empowers 21st century farming pours in from sensors in the ground that measure moisture content, from water volume monitors deep in the aquifer, from weather stations, and from generations of experience and knowledge. But here's the challenge. How can all that data become a single, meaningful, real-time indicator of how the crop is doing? Well, there is a solution. Imagine that you're a vineyard operator with the ability to log into a mobile app to see contextualized data from thousands of sensors telling you everything that's happening in your vineyard in real time from anywhere in the world. That same app helps you anticipate and respond to equipment failures before they occur through rich predictive insight, and provides detailed information about the vineyard's microclimate. Imagine receiving requests for water directly from the plants and having a system that can automatically respond, or being able to focus specifically on one row of vines or on the data from a single plant. Imagine being able to view and analyze the color of the grapes on that plant, or the ratio of the sun above the canopy to the shade below it. This is precision agriculture. This is NEO. We combine millions of unrelated complex data points and convert them into a simple, visual, richly insightful experience. And the result? Lower cost and resource consumption, higher crop yields, and better product quality. Precision agriculture is a game changer for farming. When experience combines with real-time data collected at the plants themselves, we redefine the world's oldest and most revered industry. And that is only the beginning.
So that is not just a video of that we wanted to sell something. We really believe this, that agriculture is under siege. We did some studies early on with NIO around agriculture in Africa, and estimates are as high as 30 to 40% of their land has to be converted to agriculture if they're ever going to feed that continent. And it can't be done in the way it used to be done. It's got to be done in a very precise manner because they have very rough conditions just like we have here. And so Doug Stanley, the CEO of NIO, really believes that, and that's one of his real goals, is to be able to help in a way that is not a money-making venture, but to actually get out there and help people grow food where they need it most. So let me just do a little bit more introduction of myself. As we earlier heard, I'm a retired partner from Deloitte. I retired in 2014. I was the technology, media, and telecom leader globally. Spent my life on airplanes and finally got fed up with it in 14 and said, I've had enough. I had almost 9 million miles on 3 airlines. So that is not any way to live. I want to really emphasize this second point. I have absolutely no ag background. So questions need to be in very small words because it's not what I did. I started doing this because we bought a vineyard in Argentina. How did we get that? That was my 50th birthday. Kim said, do you want a trip or do you want a party? And I said, I want a trip. Let's go to Argentina. South America reported to me, so I had lots of friends down there. I'd had great wine, but I'd never been to Mendoza. We went, got drunk, and bought a vineyard. 27-page document in Spanish, and yes, it did have the word vente, meaning sale. So we bought it. It was a condominium vineyard, so it was really kind of easy. You paid a price, and in that price, you got your land, you got to pick your vines, and then they put all the infrastructure in and farmed it for 3 years until you had your first harvest. But that got us thinking when we got back, coming back for one of my frequent flights, I kind of said to Kim, boy, this sure looks an awful lot like Mendoza. And sure enough, in December of 2009, I get a text from Kim, hey, I bought 20 acres in Willcox. Interesting thing, though, about that. Both vineyards are 33 degrees north and south of the equator. Both vineyards are roughly of the same altitude, 4,200 feet here, about 3,900 in Argentina. Similar soil types. They even get monsoons, same amplitude and temperature, and that's why we're the first in the state to plant Malbec, because we said the best Malbecs we've ever experienced come from Argentina. We bet we can grow them here. And the fact of the matter is that's really turned out to be one of the smartest plays we did. In 15, we bought 10 acres in Belgium because we wanted to have a tasting room with an on-vineyard experience, but, well, sorry to anyone from Willcox, but it's to hell and gone. It's a long way away from civilization. There's still wagon trains that go through there. Great for growing grapes, pretty hard to get a commercial business going down there. And that opened in 17, and that's how we got to where we are today. Let me shift over real quickly over into what led us to technology. Part of it was that distance to Willcox. Kim had to drive 2 hours each way. Since I didn't retire till 14, I was off the hook of doing that. And then in 15, I made sure I got fired pretty quickly from doing anything in the vineyard. And we had to have some visibility into that vineyard without doing that drive all the time. And we weren't really sure what we wanted to do, but we knew we had to find a solution. And there were some on the market, but they were very simple. There was no intelligence built into this. And that's one thing I should tell you on NIO. NIO is not sensors. NIO is all software. And it's the software that powers us to really be able to make intelligent decisions. We do a lot of learning, real-time learning with the system, and for that reason, it's been a real success. So in 15 was our pivot point. I retired, so I had to do something. As I said, I got fired, and then I said maybe I could do something technology-wise. We had a pump failure when it was 110 degrees in June, and I said we have to be able to monitor that pump a little bit better than that, than to have that happen to us. We had a ball valve failure, which I didn't even know what a ball valve was, but apparently there's a little ball that turns open and shut, and it broke off the handle and was just spinning around. So every time we put water through, depending how the ball valve was positioned, you either got full flow or almost none. So we're like freaking out. What's going on? We got a pump going. We had a pump failure. Now the pump's not working right. Well, we figured that out. So if I could measure flow, it would sure make a lot of sense. But my favorite story is the auger story. So I'm standing out there in the hot sun, and I'm watching Kim and our vineyard consultant, Don Sobey, go around and auger holes. And they'd pull the dirt up, and they'd put it in their hand, they'd squeeze it, and they'd say, 55 or 60. And I go, what the hell are you knuckleheads doing? And they said, oh, we're determining soil moisture. And that was it. I said, there's got to be a better way. I mean, I'm over the top. So I called Neo, I called Doug Stanley. We started working through it. In 2016, we started putting it in. Mostly in 16, it was the hardware. In 17, it was really kind of trying to figure out what all this data really meant. And in 18, we actually had a system in place and software in place that could actually help us interpret what we needed to do. That's the problem with agriculture. You have seasons. You have one season to get it all done. It just doesn't get done. So, we told them the 4 things we wanted was this virtual insight into the vineyard. It was vine health. It was continual improvement in berry quality and water conservation. Now, continuous improvement in berry quality is important because berry quality immediately translates into the value of the wine. And this is one agricultural product that actually has a quality premium on it. I mean, you get better berries, you get much higher prices for it. And so it seemed like a logical place to start. This is just a quick schematic of it. You can see what we basically did was we have a shed node that has all of our it has a Dell 5100 computer in there. That's where we keep all of our storage. And we do all of our computing. We have a visual center, a visual node, which is just a touchscreen panel that you can go and operate all of Neo. Weather station, we have the cloud. We don't really use the cloud. We do all our compute on the vineyard. We don't ship it out somewhere. We want no latency at all. And then we come down here to a sensor hub, which controls sensor extensions. And you see things like soil moisture, temperature, tensiometers, dendrometers, and things like that. I'm going to really be focusing on soil moisture today, so I'll tell you a little bit more about those sensors. They are Aqua check sensors. They take readings from 4 inches, 8 inches, 16 inches, 24, 32, and 40 for both soil moisture and for temperature of soil. Because Neo is a software, it takes a reading every 6 minutes. Now, that may sound like overkill, and probably is, because most of those readings don't mean anything. But if you're trying to watch how water flows through soil or how plants take it up, getting readings every 6 minutes, you get a complete detail of how water is moving within the soil. I'm making a lot of noise over here. I won't go into too much of that anymore. I just want to show you how it's kind of laid out here. There you can see the shed down there. These are all the zones. 1 and 2 are smaller ones. This is all Syrah. This is Grenache, Viognier. So we have a split block here. That's why we have 2 extensions in there. We want to be able to see what's going on. And both, this is all the Malbec up here. This is another Grenache, and this is Mourvedre. We put in 3 sensors here so we could see what happens with 3 sensors. Do we get different readings? Is this one telling us to water and this one saying, oh, hell no, you got too much water? The reality is they're not all that different. I mean, it really is. I mean, you'd make the same decision on no matter which one of those you looked at. We are thinking about next year going to some drones with infrared, so we can do that. And again, hook that right into Neo so there's not a lot of latency. We'll get the pictures very, very quickly. I'm just going to skip this one because for time. I just want to do this for my own benefit because as I said, I have no ag background. But it was these simple concepts that you guys are probably looking at and saying, oh, it's Ag 101. But for someone who wasn't there, we had no idea about water dynamics at all. I only discovered them because I started analyzing irrigation after irrigation after irrigation. And I was shocked to find that there was always this point in time when the 4-inch level started allowing water to go to the 8-inch level. And it was always at the same soil moisture reading, plus or minus 1. And I looked it up, and this is when I went to my wine grape grower's handbook and discovered there's this thing called saturation point where the soil can no longer hold the water there. What a great thing to know if you're trying to water down to a specific depth. If you're trying to get to 16 and you don't get the saturation point at 8, you ain't going to get there. Then there was field capacity, and this one I didn't really understand because I said, well, what does that mean? And I started reading and it said, hey, 24 hours or 48 hours after the end of the irrigation, this field capacity thing comes into play because gravity continues to percolate the water deeper. So it takes it from 4 and pushes it to 8, takes it from 8 and pushes it to 16. And believe it or not, these two concepts were what absolutely drive our algorithms right now. So once we identified field capacity, we said, wow, that's a pretty cool concept. That's kind of glass full. Then we have this survival inflection point. It's different from permanent wilting point for us because this is much lower. But this one here is giving us a chance to look at irrigations and look at plant uptake, and we find out what percent of field capacity are we at when the plants struggle to drink. When we start seeing them take up less than 1 soil moisture unit a day. And we can start, and we were looking at them, we were seeing they were starting to hang over, plants were in stress. So we wanted to know what that was, because that's kind of that better start watering before you get to that stage, unless you're trying to really stress it for a specific reason. Permanent wilting point, of course, it's death, so we don't want to talk about that. We didn't want to come close to it. But what really struck me was, as I went and did this, it was so consistent and so predictable, which I had no idea that's how it would work. And I had thought, oh, it would be the same across every depth. No, they're all over the map in terms of field capacity and saturation point. But they did it the same way every time. And that's when we really said, hey, we can really use this in order to automate watering. We can really use it to make sure we're getting to the right depths we want to get to. But we still had a long road to go. I'm just going to share this real quickly because this is the model that I used in my own business life. And it was what I always called the value journey. So you start here, oops, I hit the wrong button. You start here and you get data. And that's what we were getting. Our sensors were giving us all this data. And that's great. But data, you know, it's a point of data. It doesn't have any real relevance. You can look at soil moisture from zone 1 and soil moisture from zone 3. And unless you have more information, you can't really come to any conclusion because you don't know necessarily what field capacity is. Once you have that, you now have information. So what I always tried to tell my clients was, you can do all this you want, but if that data doesn't get you the information, you're wasting your time. Because I have a saying, all because you can measure something doesn't mean you should. Because I found out in the mechanical world that if I measured vibration and I measured heat, I could predict with 90% certainty something failing. And if I added amperage, the amount of power it was using, I got to 95. And I had a client that was measuring 100 different things, and I had to point out you're measuring 97 other things that add incrementally 3%. So why are you bothering? You had it with 3. But so once you get to information or something that's of value to you, now you can start looking at stuff. And the idea is, of course, to add different pieces of information to get to knowledge, which causes action, and ultimately to get up to the strategic insight, which is kind of the holy grail for me, because this means you can actually strategically plan for a specific outcome to occur. The problem with it is, in my experience, was everyone spent their time on data because it was easy. And they kept analyzing data, and they moved up a little bit here, but when you're spending that much time on data, and these are my numbers, by the way, so don't take them as if they came from some Porter business book, you weren't getting the real value, because when you put the other side on, where is the value created? The value is real. I mean, this is the basis for everything. Don't get me wrong. This is how you're going to get all this. But if you spend too much time here, you're not going to get that much value. You're really going to get it when you get up here, because this is when you can make change. You can cause change to occur when you get to the top there. So we're going to start with a little example that tries to demonstrate exactly what that is. Here are 2 zones. They're reasonable numbers for those zones given their profile. And if you ask a group of people a question, which one of those zones has more water? I mean, you guys wouldn't do it, but you might look at this and say, well, the numbers are higher here, so that must be where there's more water available. Because these numbers are obvious. Every one of them is lower than this number. The problem is you don't have something to make a decision on. So what you do have to make a decision on is once you have field capacity. Because once you have field capacity, you will see this concept of what we call percent of field capacity. In this case, all I care about, I don't care about the depths below 16, I care about these, and you'll see why I do that in a minute. 4, 8, and 16. So if I take current soil moisture percentage combined, and I divide it by the combined FC, you're going to come to 90.2% of field capacity. This one, you're at 97.3. So you would know right away, if I'm looking at NEO and I see that, I don't worry about it. There's no reason to even think about it, because I also happen to know where that survival line is, but we'll get to that in a moment. And that's really how NEO works. We're watching how these are changing as the plants take the water up. Again, because we're measuring it every 6 minutes. We can literally watch minute changes But then when you start to extrapolate over how much did it change in the last 24 hours, now you got something you can work with. So that's just the example of how really, if you think of this as the data, this is kind of information, and this is kind of knowledge, because you know when that's going to drive to zero once you get that lower number that's at the survival line. Here's what we did to figure out FC, and believe it or not, NEO confirms FC every time we do an irrigation. And this is a 20-gallon irrigation in 4, one of the zones we just looked at. Blue line is 4 inches. Once it gets to a point that the red line starts to go up, which is 8 inches, you just hit saturation point. Then red line goes up, and once you see that the green line's going up, there you've hit saturation point there, and green starts going up. The irrigation ends, but post-irrigation on that 24-hour drip, the green line starts to go down, and look down here, whatever color that is, the purple line starts to go up. That's 24 inches. This was a 20-gallon irrigation we did to try to flush salts out of the soil. We do that every year in January and February, and as well as to fill the water profile before we get to bud break. But these were the important points, this field capacity number. I can't stress enough that we look at that as saying that's the glass full. If you're at 100% of field capacity at 4, 8, and 16 inches, that is the glass is completely full at that point in time. Because if not, it's going to continue to come down because it can't hold it against gravity. So this brought us into this irrigation uptake cycle. Remarkably, in the first whole year, we never, here we were watching water percolate down into the soil all the time. And we never thought to look and see what happens between the two irrigations. Why was it going down, and at what rate was it going down? We didn't figure that out until like the end of 2017. The simplest of things, you guys probably would have figured that out on day one. But it just never occurred to us to look at it that way. We were looking at this as a water cycle, as a watering technology, as opposed to really the whole cycle of it. And so we started looking at things, and we did this from the beginning. We irrigate by gallon per vine, and we've debunked a bunch of myths in the vineyard business. Because we all go out and we get these like 12-cent emitters, and we put them in, and this one's 1 gallon an hour, this one's half a gallon an hour. And again, my little technology side says, yeah, 17-cent emitter. I really don't think it's 1 gallon an hour, guys. I'm sorry. This is pressed plastic. It's not really going to do that. And we were right. The further away you got from the pump, you had a lot of head loss, and it was much slower. So I showed you that map before. When you're in zone 1, which is too small, we actually have to try to throttle down the pressure that's in there. You'll get 3.5 gallons an hour out of that. If you go up to 12, which is furthest away, you'll get about 1.7 gallons an hour. So with NEO, we don't have that problem because we just water by gallons. It knows how many vines are in every single block, and it just makes sure it delivers that number times however many gallons we want to put on. And until it's done doing that through our flow meter, it doesn't turn itself off. So now we're getting more precise with knowing that we're putting the right amount on in each one of these blocks. We also, because we didn't just do one, we did every one of them. We looked at how it was all flowing through. We wanted to understand the dynamics when irrigating. And then this one, that 24-hour impact thing, you'll see on the next slide. This is hopefully you guys have some ideas on this. This is really the problem. This changes a lot. This doesn't do the same thing each time. Some of it does, especially very efficient zones. But ones that seem to have a lot of lateral flow away from the sensor, you can get wild swings in that, and that affects the net amount of soil moisture units delivered during that irrigation. And as I said, you'll see that in just a sec. And then this was this big aha, this depths of interest. Where was the vine drinking? We had a vineyard consultant through 17 who used to always say, and this was also what everyone does, well, you have a cycle and you put 15 gallons on every zone. The zones don't penetrate the same way. They all penetrate differently. And when I talk about chemical application, you'll see how different it is. So he would just say, well, put 15 on or put 18 on. And we never thought to look where they were actually drinking. We were actually pushing water below where they were drinking. And you might say, well, but they'll drink there. They really don't. Vines are pretty smart. They figure out water's coming from the top. The most water is always going to be present in the shallower depths. That's where all the feeder roots are. And they're pulling water from there. And even when we're at field capacity at lower levels, they'll drink very, very little. They only drink there. I mean, I kind of think of it, it's that beer you stick in the back of the fridge so your buddies don't steal it. That's when you go and you grab the water down below there. So here's a quick example of what happens. 3 different zones. Zone 3 is Syrah, Zone 5 is Syrah, Zone 12 is Mourvedre. What's amazing, all at 10 gallons per vine, 32, 30.7, and 31.8. That was the soil moisture metric increase at each of those depths. Now, in this case, it's 4 through 16. In this case, it's 4 through 8. 5 has a really odd soil structure at that 16-inch level, and unless I put 16, 17 gallons on, it's not going to get filled. And it's a very narrow drinking area. If you look at how much it will take between field capacity and the lowest it'll get to, it's about 4. So we don't ever really go there until we get to the end of the season and we're trying to fill up a whole profile. And then this one again is 4 to 16. But look at the post 24, minus 10.8, minus 11.4, minus 4.1. That's what drives the final impact. And so we're trying to do more analysis on all of this to try to see when we get variability, what might be some factors that gave variability. Was it done during the day? Was it done during the night? Fortunately, we've got some pretty powerful artificial intelligence engines on this that we can actually pour through a lot of data very quickly and see if we can't find an answer to that. This just takes a look at where we're saying, we target water to where the vines are looking for it. This is the percentage in each one of these that it takes from 4 from 16. And the only one that's outside of 90 is zone 1. And the only reason zone 1 is outside of 90 is water from rain really impacts this zone a tremendous amount because it's at the lowest point in the vineyard. And we've had some rainstorms that have allowed us to fill to field capacity and even above field capacity all the way down to 40 inches. And so this to us was why we sat there and said, hey, if we're really trying to conserve water and we know how much water it takes and we know all this other data like saturation point and field capacity, can we water just to hit 4 to 16 in the case of these zones and 4 to 8 in the case of these zones? And these two that are down in the mid 80s, they also have 2 special stories too. Zone 2, because this is for the whole growing year, I should say. Zone 2 at 85 is only at 85 because twice we put on an irrigation there for 10 gallons per vine and the solenoid failed and didn't shut, and we didn't find out about it until we saw the flow in one of the other zones that was watering and realized 2 hadn't shut off. And so we now have a way that NIO will notify us if that happens, but we ended up putting twice instead of 10 to 30 gallons per vine. So it went way down. So it did go and drink from 16 and 24 and 32 because it was filled with water. In the case of 9, it's a very narrow zone. You'll see that on the next slide, and then I think we'll start to get into the demo of the software itself. That's one that we do water to 16 once every 3 irrigations because we do need to get water down there. It's because it's just a very shallow amount of soil moisture percent that it can take out of there, and you'll see that when you see that survival line, I think, on the next slide here. So all this is the information we use every single day when we're trying to irrigate. And I thought it'd be useful to just kind of explain how we got to where we got to with the software, because the software is really actually very, very simple. Here's the survival inflection point. This is actually zone 1. It's an irrigation from June, I think it was. And I mean, once we see this, when we see the flattening, and this is the uptake when we irrigate it, and here's the vines pulling it down. Once you get to here, it literally goes flatline. It might go down 1 or 2 percentage points of FC below that. You can get to 83 and 84 or 82, but you're going like a week and a half, and you just don't want to do that because when you get to right about here or the next day, you got vines that are hanging like this. You got leaves that are starting to roll. And so we figured out what all of these were, literally by just analyzing the data and watching where that point was. And when we get into the system, you'll see we're precisely irrigating at a certain point every time. We're not guessing anymore. We're doing something specifically because we're getting a number that tells us 85, you better water, at least for zone 1. It's different in all the zones. So here you can see what it is by zone. Pretty much all over the map, 9 is our problem child, as you can tell. That's 90% of FC. It really stops drinking. 6 is kind of our superstar that gets to 82. Now, we all think of PWP as when they stop drinking. PWP, as I understand it, is really when the soil no longer let water escape it. They actually chemically bond with water. We actually do an available water content, which does factor in PWP in both the numerator and denominator. And it's kind of a logarithmic scale of this. So if you look at this being down at 82, that's 18. If you took 18 times 2.8, that would be approximately the percent that it would be an AWC. It'd be about 40%. So it's really not as far away from where you might think PWP would be if you actually factored it in and you did available water content. And that actually was my favorite, but then everyone said they liked field capacity better. So NIO actually does it both ways. You can see both numbers at any point in time. Permanent wilting point, yeah. And we calculate permanent wilting point based on data that was given to us from a number of sources, because the different soil types we're able to, because of the soil moisture sensors we used, we actually calculated a representative composition of the soil that was there, whether it was clay, sand, silt, whatever it might be. And this is this drinking range within the distance that it goes. So in the case of 9, it's really only 4 and 8, but you can see how much smaller it is than some of the others. So this one, this one, and this one all have to be watered more often, just to make sure that they're not there. But we know that. We don't have to guess anymore. We actually know that. So here's the chemical one. I'm going to do this real quick because I want to get to the demo. Here you can see that this is zone 1. And what I'm really looking for here is, well, I should say, everyone told us, put a gallon on again with the chemical going through, think nitrogen. And then put another gallon on if you're trying to get to 4 and 8 inches down, because that's where the roots will take it up and everything will be hokey pokey and you'll be great. So what that should mean is you should find a point where you're at or above SP up here on the 4-inch, and you've started to see water come down here. So in this case, when we looked at this data, we said 4. We need 4 gallons here. So put a gallon on, put the chemical in, and then put 2 more gallons on, and you will clearly be in pretty good shape at 4 and 8 inches, because the same thing that happens here at the end of this irrigation is now going to happen at this point. So it'll be a little less, but it's going to come down to right about there, and that water is going to fall mostly down to 8 inches. But look at zone 9. I'm picking on 9. I'm sorry. It's a pain in the butt. But here, you're all the way out here at 6. Going to 7 before you get anything. And the interesting one about this one, the SP is remarkably higher than the field capacity in this case. So you get this huge buildup of water before it starts to let it go down to 8. So you literally have to get out there at 7. So this is one that we sit there and say it's 1 or 2 gallons, then the chemical, then the remainder to get to 7 gallons. And we've looked at those when we do them, and we sit there and say, bingo, we got it right to where we wanted to at 4 and 8 inches. And if we'd gone with just the standard do at 3, it wouldn't have worked very well for us. So with that, let me go into NIO. See if I can do this. This is a really, really freaky little fast thing. Okay. So this is basically the home page when you come there. It's called the dashboard. It does, if I can figure out how to use this silly thing. So if I pull it down, you can see here are recommendations from NIO. On the side is, of course, the map over there. Let's see if I can, I may need your help with scrolling this thing. That thing is really moving fast. I'll just kind of get out of the way over here. If we could just scroll down a little bit. So on that one, and then if you see, we should be able to get down there. So this is telling you there's no valve stats open right now, and you get a little weather data here. And that way you get a little bit. Now, if you could click over here on irrigation, this is where I normally turn first, is irrigation. If we could just scroll down a little bit, you just push it with your finger. So what this is showing us, this is great right here. This is showing us the current field capacity number at whatever point in time. This is actually real live data. It comes from this week. This is why going live didn't make a lot of sense, because it's all, at this point, the vineyard's dormant. It's not really drinking anything. But here you can see the FC numbers, and you'll notice those are lower than a lot of the survival line numbers there. There's the AWC numbers. That's what I meant when I said it's kind of a logarithmic scale. And so you can go back and forth between those. We'll just leave that over on FC. And again, down, oh, I see, here's the bar. Seems like a skittish little guy here. And down here is weather information again. So you can go look at this. Here's all the irrigations for all the zones. And there's the map of the zone. If I go over to schedule here, I'll show you how I can schedule it. One way is just to sit here and enter it manually. I need to get a new one of these little mouse I can schedule it. I just click a zone. I click number of gallons per vine I want. If I, for whatever reason, want to do it by hour, it's right there. And then I hit schedule. Oops, I don't like the way this is presented here. And then you just go to status and you hit start now, or you select the time for it to start at. Or you just go down to recommended irrigations and you click schedule and it will do that. With one click of the button, I want to point this guy out right. That little button there, if you click it to Neo starts running everything. The moment that goes over to Neo, it does it all for you. You don't even have to look at this except to make sure you do a couple of things right, which you're going to see in a minute. So that's as simple as it gets. If I come back up here and I go over to valve stats, if we were doing an irrigation, what would be here would be the current flow rate. It would be the how many gallons have been delivered. It would be how many gallons remaining to be delivered. But that flow rate's really important because we now know what the right flow rate should be. And if we get outside that, an alert gets sent that says you got a leak. You should be running at 42. You're running at 48. We're going to shut it off. We'll go to the next one. Again, trying to save water. So now if I come overview, we're going to go right into an actual zone. So we're going to go to zone 3. Can I get you up again? I just want to go down. Oh, there's a wheel there on the side.
It depends on if you're inside.
Okay, so now you're seeing the gallons per vine delivered in each one of these irrigations. Little wheel over here, I see. No, I don't know how to do it. Where's the wheel? Oh, up top.
But it depends on whether you're inside.
Yep.
This window.
Yep, got it. Okay, now I know how to do it. Okay. So you can see all the gallons that were delivered, and then if I come over here and come out of that, this is a mouse problem for me. It's too sensitive. You can come up here. Oh, come on. So here's the status in zone 3. So right now, or at least when this was, it was 50.6 a temp. It's recommending 14 gallons. It's giving me my available water in AWC. It's also giving me the field capacity there, so we have both. This is where it starts to get exciting. See these buttons right here? Let's come over here and show you. I'm going to get all the way down so I can kind of walk away from this silly mouse thing. These buttons allow me to tell Neo what to irrigate up to and where to irrigate when it gets low. Those are all based on some of the stuff I've already been talking about. So I can set those wherever I want throughout the year, and it will actually execute against those percentages of field capacity. These buttons down here are also very important. This is telling Neo what depths am I interested in terms of making sure I water to. So this, I'm telling Neo, I don't care about 24 inches. And if you look over here, you'll see that this adds up to, that adds up to about 60. So this is about 83, so a little lower than that other chart. But this is at the end of the year. We just did a lot of really deep watering here. So there is water down below here. If you were looking at this back in June, July, and August, these numbers would total somewhere in the mid, 90%. So 93, 94, 95. And that's why we would water to those. These over here are your current soil moisture readings and also your soil temp readings. If we just go, see if I can do this again. So if we come up here, we're going to go back up to the irrigations. Come up to these last ones here. So here we go, 11.3. Let's click on this. Now you're going to see the whole detail of that irrigation. Where did we start? Started right over there. There's the field capacities at each one of those levels. Started here, ended here. Here was the net change. Here was 24 hours later. That's our definition of field capacity time. We lost about 8, gained about 7. Very efficient irrigation. At the end of the day, we're at 102, 195% of field capacity at those zones that we're interested in. We have this for every single irrigation. So even if you're doing it manually, you have so many reference points to go back to. And again, notice, we're starting to confirm whether FC is correct or not, because you're getting that every single time we irrigate here. If I come back down a little bit again, I'm going to show you another fun chart. See this open detail over here? If I click on that, it's going to show me what happened here over this time period from October 31st to 2018 to today. And a couple really interesting things on this one, and one of them I'd be curious if anyone has any idea why this is happening. You can see the irrigation here. That was a 10-gallon irrigation, the one we just looked at. There was the impact. So we got up just below 100, and you could tell that by the three numbers we had there. What I'm interested in is, and if I slide the pointer over that, it'll actually tell you the time of every one of these readings and what the number was. But we've noticed, now that it's gotten colder, we get these little blips every day. It kind of goes up, and we don't know if maybe there's some form of the cold is kind of freezing some of the water, and the soil moisture sensor isn't really looking at it, but we are getting these little bumps here, and we haven't had time to really go look at that. If we look over a longer time period, those kind of go away. But this shows us, I'm going to show you a longer one. Pardon? In that time frame, and in the mid-20s. Yeah, it's been the mid-20s at 6 in the morning. Yeah. It gets cold down there. Nobody realizes how cold it gets there, but I was looking at data the other day, and it actually started right around November 12th is when we really started getting it, and we actually started hitting freeze. And it was after that I started noticing those little bumps. I don't notice them in the summertime. That's why I'm not really sure what that might be. If I give you a little broader view of this little puppy here, we'll just do, or we'll go do even bigger. You can see when Kim tried to kill her vines. Got to give it a minute. There. There's a complete rendition for about a 5-month period. We're not quite getting it down here on the bottom, but we actually now have rainfall impact. So when you see something like this, and it's down here, I don't know why it's just off screen. You know, you see a little irrigation there, but right after that we get these big upticks. That's rainfall. And that's displayed down here in yellow. But you can go through all these and you'll notice how consistently a lot of these are. But when you come back into here, I didn't go back far enough. I thought I went to June 1st. Okay, well, I won't show you Kim's debacle. And here you can even see these little bumps here. I mean, she remembers. We got a plan for that. But so we've got this whole history. So when we go to 2019, we know exactly what the low points were. We have a max in every single day. And, you know, we take that data and we use it. And you know, really, that's pretty much what the whole system is. There are other features in here of, I'll show you a couple real quickly. They're pretty cool. We do measure our well depth. We've had one of our neighbors ran out of water, so we decided we didn't want to do that. And so we know what the water level is. We know where our pump is. We've got about 60 feet to go. And we know right now we're at 359.1 feet here. We were at 360 the other day, so it went up. This is a fun one we haven't been using. This is actually an ability to load photos, take notes while you're in the field. You can use this from an iPad, and you can start to do all of this, and you actually have a real representation of everything going on. The analytics down here is something that I just need to fill. This will be all of our new metrics around our fruit. What was the quantities taken off? What dates were they taken off? What was the pH? What was the Brix? All of that will be loaded for each one of these. It's already developed. We just haven't put it in. We have an event log that allows you to look and see what happened, because sometimes that's how we figure out that when the solenoid didn't go off, when should it have gone off, and when, because we get an error message, and when did it go off, and we can calculate out approximately the amount of water that went. And then a system view is just across the board, very too small to read. But here's where we have loaded all of our saturation points, our field capacity, our PWPs, and those get updated. Those get updated by the system itself as it looks and it keeps doing irrigation after irrigation after irrigation. We also, it's not in this one, but we have a report writing ability. So I can go out and I can select any time period and ask for certain data, and I'll get a data array in Excel. And so now I can start manipulating it and do an analysis on my own outside of it. A lot of that is how we've added features to this. So there's one added feature here. What was the daily drawdown? They're doing an average. I want it every day. I want to take it from 6 a.m. from previous day to 6 a.m. the current day. And that'll be displayed not only in a number. So that's when I want to see that when that starts approaching 1, I know I got to think about that zone getting watered. But when you click on it, you'll get a more detail. You'll see what it was every day since the last irrigation. Just another tool to help you decide what you should or should not be doing. Okay, so how do we get out of this now and go back to the thing, and I'll wrap this thing up. I know, it's really fast. Okay, I can go from there. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this value journey thing here real quickly and kind of go through that. So we really started a couple years ago with soil moisture readings from every 6 minutes from 6 different depths. From that, we determined SP and FC at all 6 depths for every single zone. We got a history of every zone's irrigations. We can look back on it. If we're ever curious, what does 6 gallons do? What does 10 gallons do? We've got it, in detailed form, or at least in that summarized form. We've got it in detailed form from the report writer. We've got specific water dynamics per zone. How does it actually flow through there? What happens in the post 24? We've identified those uptake depths. Those change during the year, so we will actually change those numbers. We'll light up different bubbles as the year proceeds. Once we get to about June, it's going to be either that 4 through 16 or that 4 and 8. We also made it so that if you try to put 4, 8, and 24, it won't let you do that because they've got to be contiguous. You can't kind of skip a depth. That doesn't work. That's not how water flows. And we've got this concept of percent of FC for whatever depths we're really considering to be the most important to us, those bubbles we lit up. We developed, irrigation algorithms. We're finding we're right at about plus or minus 1% of what our target is. Chemical application rate by zone, showed you that earlier. Impact of rain by zone, 4 zones in particular are really impacted, with 2 of them being substantial, zone 1 and zone 11. We got to take a little look into that to why. They're both very quick fillers, so I'm sure it's related to that. One is more because it's kind of at that northwest corner, which is the lowest corner. We only irrigate to the depths where the vines are taking water. You'll see what we saved in water this past year. We're pretty proud of it, but we think we can do better next year. We have identified that survival inflection point by zone, which allows us to stress those vines, and I'll talk about that right now. This is my last slide, I promise. So we really saw 4 things that got us to strategic insights, and the first one here is quality. We reduced our berry size by 15 to 20%, and we did that because Kim got a little aggressive right around the end of May and early June, and really kept them. She has a guy now that said kill them, and she tried, but I think I may have interceded and said you have to water these, but dropping them. And so downside, we dropped our crop load from 60 tons to 50 tons, but small, pardon? No, in total. And so what ended up happening though, smaller berries, as you shrink the berry, you increase the ratio of skin to juice. And higher skin is where all the flavors are, particularly in red wine. So you get much more robust flavors. I tried the Syrah 525 7 days after it went into barrel, and the mouthfeel was totally different than I've ever felt in any Arizona wine. So it's got to be in barrel for almost 2 years. We might lose that, I don't know, but that we actually intended to do this. So we're pretty pumped that we could actually do this. We're getting the vine to do what we want it to do. This is based off a model by Molly Duker, if you know the vineyard over in Australia. It's deficit irrigation, but he has this model that says, if you want to grow canopy, you keep it above this level. If you want to work on the grapes and the phenolics, you want to keep it between these two. And if you want to really scare the hell out of them and get small berries, drop it below the survival line for a couple of days. From a fruit health standpoint, we've had a terrible time with bunch rot and shrivel in our Grenache in the last 3 years. We had absolutely none. We dropped 30% of our Grenache in 2017, dropped to 0. And we got that because that same thing, berry size. Berry size is real tiny. If you saw how stringy the grapes were instead of these big football clusters, football clusters are what cause bunch rot, because if it rains, water gets in the inside and it starts rotting from the inside out. We got none of that. And so our fruit health was much, much better. Just on that whole concept, we sell about half our grapes, and we ask everyone to give us comments. The comments were things like, once again, absolutely exceptional fruit, but why would I think you wouldn't give it to me? We had one guy, we couldn't give him our 525 Syrah because our tonnage was down, and a buddy of his bought some and brought it into his winery, and he called up and said, okay, I have to have some of this next year. This looks awesome. We are vineyard designated by most people who buy our grapes, meaning on their label it will say Deep Sky Vineyard, because having Deep Sky Vineyard on the label is starting to connotate higher quality wines in the state of Arizona. We have 4 different makers that do that now. So really proud of that, but probably just as proud of this. Because we stopped doing 20-gallon cycle irrigations, we saved roughly about 1.6 million gallons, or about 100,000 gallons an acre. If you break it down, that's just a matter of going from 15 and 20-gallon irrigations down to 10 and 8. Because there's, in some of these zones, well, we have about 1,000 vines to the acre. So you do that, 6, 7, 8 times, you get the bulk of that number there. But if you extrapolate that out over the vineyard acreage in the U.S., it's about 120 billion gallons if you could actually get everyone to start using something like this and trying to do more precise watering. And let's face it, vineyards are not the biggest part of agriculture. There's a lot more that there's a lot of crops that are, like cotton that flood irrigate that use way more. We use about 0.9 on average of an acre foot of water throughout the entire growing year. Which is a fraction when you consider the climate we're growing this in. And then continuous improvement. We have the complete record of 2018. We have a preliminary farming strategy for 2019. For instance, one of those would be, we saw that the vines didn't drink a lot in April, except when that percent of field capacity was above 95%. If it was there, they doubled to tripled their drinking. So in order to promote the building of canopy at that time, we're going to not let it go below 95. That bottom bubble will be set at 95. So start bumping it up. We'll probably let Neo run that because it'll be small irrigations, 3-4 gallons at a time. But that way we're going to see if we can grow bigger canopy. And as long as Kim will agree, we may not try to kill the vine so much at fruit set. So that's our story. We've had a lot of fun doing it. We're learning a lot. The name Deep Sky was named that way because it's all about exploration. We really believe growing grapes in Arizona it's kind of like the unknown. Nobody really knows exactly how to do it, so in many ways we're exploring how to grow grapes in an arid environment. So thank you very much for having us here, and I hope you got some value out of that.
Okay, don't go away. Don't go away. Yeah. We have the 3 guys. You're welcome to come up. Grab one. Okay, just one. Okay, but you got to talk into the microphone, sir. Very well, very good. Well, you remind me a lot of what we do with tomatoes. And what we have done with tomatoes now, it's much more instantaneous. You're over the whole season, we're over just days.
Yeah.
But we've gone to constant liquid feed. And so we really watch the electrical conductivity, which is the salinity.
Yep.
And moving that salinity around, we can really govern the bricks. And doing that timing, that we can size the tomatoes the way we want to. In other words, Nature Sweet, which you buy in the store, is that we have moved that up from 4 to 6.5, 7 bricks. Of course, you have to get a lot higher.
Yeah, we're up at 25, 26
yeah,
sometimes.
But is there a way that you can include the salinity?
We need to take a hard look at that, and here's why. Salinity has a direct impact on pH. It drives it higher. And so we need to take a look at that. We know we need to take a look at that. The beauty of Neo is the way the software is designed. It can take a signal from anything. It doesn't care. It's agnostic to the signal. Neo actually stands for neutral interoperable. And so it's saying it's neutral to any signal. We can take it, and then through our software, we can figure out what to do with it.
Yeah, that pH would change if you got certain elements in there that are not readily used by that plant. So in other words, you got to leach those out.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, I think that you can still add on to what you're doing by measuring bricks and getting to a point in your season that you can start lowering that, raising the salinity, raising the EC, and move those bricks up. And remotely, I think you can probably do that.
You know that's a great point, and you're probably over here now on my knowledge. So good. No, this is great because it is an issue. I mean, the pH gets too high down here. We find that the bricks also will tend to jump, and we're trying to figure out how to let the fruit hang a little bit longer. Fruit. There are really 2 types of fruit. One that once you pick them, they ripen. Bananas would be a great example. Grapevines or wine grapes, actually, once you pick them, they start to decay. So you have to try to pick them at their absolute peak of ripeness, because once they go, they start deteriorating. And we actually had an article we wrote called "You Just Can't Duct Tape the Grapes Back On." So making that pick decision, she'll tell you, is the hardest thing on her.
So clearly, conserving water is one of your primary goals.
Yes.
Have you considered the possibility of tinting the vine stems to reduce evaporation?
We haven't. We've talked about up in Eastern Washington, they're doing, I don't think it's ground tinting, but they're doing something with a canopy that helps with not only evaporation, but helps with shading and cooling the plants down. We had a trip planned to go up there, and then we had to cancel it. So that's back on our schedule for 2019 to go up there and see what they're doing, because our environment is even harsher than theirs, I believe. So they must have an easy way to deploy them, because you got to get equipment in and out of there, but we want to go see what they're doing.
Is Neo commercially available?
They are talking to a number of people right now, larger companies. Their software, they don't want to be the ones who deploy this out there. It's a special relationship Doug and I have that I said you could use my Vineyard as a lab, if you will. So they're talking to folks much larger, multi-billion-dollar companies in tech who have the reach and the manpower to actually go out and distribute it. They really want to just be a software company that has the capability to do these things, but find somebody else who's going to be an integrator.
Really nice presentation. One of the things I was wondering about is soil types, and if it looks like you're just using these sensors at your 20-acre farm that's down in Willcox. Have you contemplated putting them into your 10-acre and see if your algorithms hold up under different conditions?
We have. It's just the one in Elgin is only in its second year, so we just kind of turn water on all the time. We haven't worried about it yet. It will start producing next year, but we'll have to look at that. I mean, it's amazing how addicted you get to this stuff, because when you actually know what's going on, when like we had one time when we did a software upgrade and we pretty much lost the system for 2 days. I mean, I was like a caged tiger. I'm like, I got to know what that damn number is. I mean, it's an important number, and I got to know. But I would think Elgin eventually. The other problem in Elgin is we haven't planted the whole thing out yet, and it's probably best for us to decide where else we're going to put things so we can figure out where to locate things like the computer system and all that, so that it gets in the right place and we're not trying to reconfigure it over and over again.
Sure. Do you have much of a sense for how your soil varies over your 20-acre farm in Willcox?
I'm sorry?
Do you have much of a sense for how your soil type or profile varies over your...
Yeah, we do know. We have some nice areas that are apparently some form of sand and probably clay, because we get field capacities down at like 50. We do have some, what's that called where it's really hard? Caliche. We have one zone that we can get 24, and it never gets past 24. I mean, it just sits there, and 40 just is like, looking up above and saying, what's the deal, dude? So yeah, and we know that there's some veins that go through. We actually thought about doing, what is it when you drag the magnet through to try to get a better profile of it all? But they were concerned because the vineyard was already built, and there's so much metal out there between stakes and wires that they basically said it would probably not give you what you wanted. That was their recommendation.
Since you have a no ag background, what makes you trust Neo for their sensors and what sort of inputs they're giving you?
Well, Neo doesn't have sensors. Neo is just the software that's aggregating the signals. So we have Aqua check sensors. Tell you what, I'll show you the slide that shows I just took it out, but I have a slide here that shows all the different, these are all kind of the partners that they have, that they work with. So these are all established ag companies. It's just, they're really just the software. They're the ones who can take all these signals, they compute at the edge. That's a big deal. Computing at the edge isn't done very often. Everyone loves the cloud. If you try to go into what I find ag technology, everyone wants to say, oh, well, you're going to rent it from us, we're going to put it into our cloud, we're going to compute it, and then we'll send you the results. If you talk to folks out there, they'll tell you, yeah, that's great. We also tend to get it about 24 to 48 hours after the fact. I know right now. If I had the live thing, I know exactly what it is. I'm not waiting at all. And when I was in the tech field, the biggest thing I hated was latency. It just drove me nuts. If you're going to do something for me, it's going to take you 24 hours to get it to me. No. I mean, I know one of the bigger vineyards up in Napa Valley. I know the culturist and winemaker, and he has I don't know if it's, I think it's soil moisture probes. They have the handheld device that they pick up and they go plug it in and they get a reading, and the guy goes out to like 70 different sites in Napa Valley. Dropping around different sites, and he goes and he gets all these, he writes them on a piece of paper, and he sends them to him, all the detail of what it is, about 4 days after he gets them. And I'm like, Richie, what's the value of that? I mean, honestly, 4 days. You're waiting 4 days to find out what it was. It's Thursday, you're finding out what it was on Sunday. I mean, that's crazy. So, I mean, but that's what it is sometimes.
So what make
No, go ahead.
what makes you trust what you see on the NioLab website?
Because all they're doing is taking data and organizing it in a certain fashion. So the sensors are all giving it data, and they're collecting it through wireless, or we actually have fiber optic from our field hub to our IO node.
Yeah. Do they know anything about plants to consult you with?
A lot of the features I come up with because I analyze the data. So I do a lot of the analysis of it. They do a lot of the algorithms. I give them my thoughts on how you might do the algorithms, but they're much more mathematically inclined than I am. And Doug actually has an ag background. He did a lot of work for Chiquita Banana, but not viticulture.
Also said our most important partner is our vineyard manager that's in the field. So we have daily conversations. This is what we see in the system. What do you see out there? And we'll often, if you walk every row in our vineyard, it's 17 miles. And we have a gator, and he can cover a lot of territory, but it helps him too if we tell him, go look at this particular block. And so we do a lot of confirmation. We don't take the farmer out of the equation.
Right, and that's a very important point.
Oh, I'm Kim. I'm married to Philip, and I'm the farmer.
But what she says is very important, because I've had conversations where there've been a lot of farmers in the room, and they're like, "Well, you're telling me I'm not worth my weight in gold anymore," and I'm like, "Absolutely not." I mean, to your point, you can't just necessarily blindly rely on this. The way I look at agriculture technology, it's a way of really leveraging the talent of the farmer in an entire awful doing stuff that I don't think is really high up on that value chain. And if they're armed with that, because G can look at that every day, same as I can when he gets up. And so when he gets there, he ought to have a sense of what block to go to first, because he should see signs of stress. And he's getting better at it. I mean, he's only a 23-year-old kid, but he's very interested in this because his dad runs vineyards, and he was so excited this year because he said our vineyard was the best-looking vineyard in the state. And he takes great pride in that, and so he's starting to trust Nio, because Nio isn't inventing anything with a signal. It's just taking them and reporting them. But you'd be surprised how difficult that is to do on a real-time basis. I don't know that really exists anywhere else out there, because there's also one thing to do it maybe in a hothouse. It's a little different when you get outside. It's a much more brutal environment, and we're a small vineyard, but you get into a Gallo that has like 80,000 acres of this stuff. Because by the way, you don't have to just use this to get better quality. You can use this to get more quantity if you wanted to. So there's lots of applications for it. And I guess I've never thought along the line of your question, because it's to me, it's just a reporting mechanism. I can watch the numbers change if I'm sitting there on my live system. I mean, it's kind of boring to watch because every 6 minutes it doesn't change very much. But it's when you get to look at it over time. And I've never noticed anything that's inconsistent, like we weren't watering and all of a sudden the soil moisture jumped up. I mean, if that happened, I see rain fell. But so I don't see anything like that would tell me there's any manipulation of the data.
So I have another question about irrigation. I surmise that you do zone irrigation and not individual plant irrigation. Is that right?
Correct. It's too hard to do individual.
So does it make any sense to go to something like drip?
Well, we do have drip irrigation. It's all a drip irrigation system. So for instance, we have that zone 7, that's 12 rows wide, six rows of Viognier, 6 rows of Grenache. So we actually have shut-off valves in there that we can go in and shut off half of it, because Viognier, being a white grape, requires more water. So that's kind of a split block. That's why we have 2 sensors, one in the Grenache, one in the Viognier, because we're trying to say, is the Viognier side mimicking the Viognier in block 8, and is the Grenache side of 7 mirror imaging the Grenache of block 6? So that's where we do it a little differently. But that's all manual. We've talked about maybe going to that be wireless.
I'm not an agriculturist, but as a person who just doesn't know that much about the situation, could I ask, in other parts of the world, they say that the soil makes a difference in terms of the quality of the grapes. And would you ever consider measuring things like the need for fertilizer or adding organic material to the soil over a 5-year plan or something like that?
Absolutely. Most of the soil here in Arizona, I think, is organically dead. And so we now have a spreader that can spread chicken poop. So anyone who wants to come down when we're doing that, you're more than welcome to be there. But it's all pelletized. But you're absolutely right. So we are looking at that. We do a lot of soil amendment. What is it? We put down gypsum to try to break up the clay, because you get a lot of clay here. And that's one of the reasons why NEO will recalculate field capacities on a regular basis, because it does change. And Kim has some that NEO didn't change that she'd like to, because I didn't let NEO change it, because they were down at 40. And I said, who cares? I mean, at this point, we never even get close to that, except when we do those big 20-gallon irrigations, and then it drinks about 3 soil moisture points for the year.
So it sounds like you've got an opportunity here for being able to see what's happening in the soil.
I'd say it's called dirt goggles.
Yeah, and it gives you another opportunity where you could take the soil off, maybe replace it with something with different rates of percolation,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe manipulate, structurally engineer the field.
You're right. I mean, you saw on 9 seems to be our problem child. And it's really funny, because I kept looking at it and saying, this is ridiculous. 9 isn't drinking as much as 10, and they're the same clone. But when you go and you look at, because we took pictures of the vines that are right near the probes, and the vine near the probe in zone 9 is as healthy, if not more healthy, than the vine is in zone 10. Now, do I have a definitive answer to that? No, I don't. And there is a need to think about things like that. That's why I'd like to use drone with infrared on it to really take a hard look at whether or not, because if I program it, I can actually fly over it, and NEO will know where the probe is, and we'll look at the color at the probe, and we'll extrapolate that out. Do I see red hot spots or blue cold spots? And if you do, you can go out and you can manipulate. If you got a red hot spot, just put in another 1-gallon emitter. Where you have a cooler spot, maybe you take out a 1-gallon emitter, put a half-gallon emitter in there, and pray that 17-cent device actually works. We haven't done that yet, no. I do have a drone. I need to outfit it with infrared cameras. We can actually put NEO on the drone.
Well, thank you, Phil. That was really great. I really learned a great deal, so I really appreciate that. The first time I came into precision ag, and I finally got it, I guess. So anyway, I got 3 questions, and I hope I'll just ask them, and then let people kind of jump in. Number one is NEO mostly geared towards managing irrigation water, or does it do other things?
Yeah,
It
it can literally do almost anything. We've thought about putting it on the tractor so we can monitor where that goes using GPS, because as Kim said, if you walk every row, it's 17 miles. It's real easy to miss a row. We could put it on a canopy sprayer to know when when it went on, when it went off, and therefore you could make sure that you actually got all the plants during that. We haven't done that. We do have it on our well. We do have it on all our flows, so we know all the flow rates. We do have it on our chem tank, so we can see how much went out with any chemical application. And we do have in canopy sensors. We need to add one about solar index, because we mistakenly thought that shade was cooler than outside, and that's not the problem. Shade and outside are about the same, but the shade feels cooler because the solar index is lower. So we want to know what that is, because that's what heats up the berries, and you don't want those berries being heated up.
And then the second question is, I guess there's no running away from bringing up the issue of cost when it comes to precision ag application. So, like, what is the percentage sort of water costs in terms of the full operation of the farm? Like, in other words, how would you justify implementing something like this?
So
If it
this is a Cadillac. When you put in fiber optics, you're kind of bulletproofing it. You could have, I think at one point we calculated out the capacity of this system, and our vineyard could hold something like 200,000 sensors. So let's forget that for a moment. I mean, the real cost right now are the sensors. And so you think about what do, in our case, we have 15 soil moisture sensors in the field, and they all run about $1,000. Then you got to factor in the wireless communication, and you can do it mostly with wireless now. I mean, if I were architecting it today, I'd do it all wirelessly, which probably in a field our size runs, by the time you get it all set up, probably around $9,000–10,000. And then the computers really aren't as expensive as one might think. They are, a Dell 5100 computer is probably around $4,500. We actually have two we don't need to. We have one in the field hub and we have one in the shed hub. And in fact, we were actually told by Dell we were the first ones to deploy the 5100 IoT computer in the world. That's why they led off their sales conference twice with it. So all that said, with a license on top of that, so your upfront cost of fixed assets, I don't know if I really added it up very well in my head, but it's probably about $35,000 to $1,000. And then the annual ongoing license fee, I don't really know what it is because I don't pay it. Since I'm the lab, I get it free. But you probably have a couple seats and typical things like that would probably add another $8,000 or $9,000 per annum. But that would be your only per annum cost. So, and it really for high value crops. So, right now until sensor costs come down, it's kind of hard to go do it in a wheat field or a corn field. And you need disposable sensors at that point that last 2 years or something like that. But certainly for nuts, certainly for fruit, tea, coffee, all high dollar crops, you could do it for. So, it's going to find its way in slowly, but the cost curve is coming way down.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think I need to make a shameless plug, I suppose. I do a lot of drone image processing. I would love to sort of collaborate with you down the road once you implement the drone stuff in your work. We do a lot of image processing.
I've seen your thing. Remember, that thing is gigantic. We were up there with Jose, and I was like, oh, what is that? Hey, that's how we take our... I'm like, geez, that's like an MRI for 1,000 people.
And then finally, one last question, I guess it comes to mind of someone like me is the system hacking proof? I mean, when you're open to the web, is it something that comes to mind, or you have to worry about that?
Well,
and thank you.
That's a great question. We haven't had any problem. It's since we don't use the cloud, we don't really go out. And here's another thing to think about. We're running this whole thing off like a 10 megabit upspeed link. So we really don't go there. I mean, for us to send a picture off to the cloud, it takes us a long time. And so since we all compute there, we have firewalls on the vineyard, and you can't access it except through VPNs, which are all controlled by Nio and us. That's why I didn't do the live one. Sometimes the VPN gets kind of a little freaked out when I'm trying to connect from someplace it doesn't know. So just like anything else, so it could probably be hacked, yeah.
Okay, we're getting late here in time, but there's one more question we'd like to have, and then we'll thank you for your time.
You were talking about disposable sensors in a bigger field. You were talking about disposable sensors in a bigger field. How often do you have to recalibrate the sensors that you have?
So we tend to, every year we have one sensor at least that isn't quite sure what it's doing. It just kind of has a bad day, I guess, and we'll go down and we'll unplug everything and reboot it. And it's not a big effort. I mean, it's got a screw cap, and you go and you check the connection going to the sensor in the ground, and then it's got a port that it plugs into on our wireless system. And so far, that's worked just fine. We did have to pull out one probe one time because it failed, and so we put in another one to replace it. But that was the only one we had a problem with. So far, Aqua check is, knock on wood, done pretty good.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Any more questions? Yeah.
Tomatoes. Good tasting tomatoes.
No more? Okay, I want to thank you again for coming, and especially to Kim and Philip for giving us a fascinating presentation about the progress in precision agriculture, and especially in Arizona. Thank you very much for taking time out of your, what I know is a very busy schedule. And thank you, Kim, and thank you, Philip. And before you leave, there is some more drinkable grapes to take advantage of. And finally, some produce from the teaching greenhouse, courtesy of Stacy Tollefson. And I want to say one more thing. I want to thank our IT genius, Brad, who made it all possible for the entire world, so to speak. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay. Are we still on? Okay. Yeah, so I'm Stacy Tollefson, if you didn't know who I am. I run the teaching greenhouse, and so we have red tomatoes and some yellow tomatoes from my teaching greenhouse.